Welcome to the Deconstructing Data podcast and live stream. I'm Jessie Lezak, CMO at BDEX, along with David Finkelstein, BDEX's founder and CEO. What's new this week with you, David?
Hey, Jesse, good to see you. Yeah, it's still cold here in Florida, so here I am in a sweater. It's crazy.
So cold is how cold?
Well, I don't know. It's been in the 40s. I mean,
40s, that's cold.
I think it got in the 50s today. But overnight, it's been in the 40s. It's been in the 30s as well. So it's kind of
Ooh,
been
so it did
crazy.
freeze.
Yeah, it's
Nice.
actually been kind of crazy. But I'm just ready to get it to warm back up and get some normal Florida weather.
So you're not a cold plunger? You didn't go jump in the ocean?
I am not in any way. I did my time up north, and I moved down here to escape from that.
Yeah, well, I understand. And,
Mhm.
warmer weather makes for more time to talk about data. And we have a really great guest today. It's a cheesy way to get into it.
Trying to find some way to segue, right?
Yeah, exactly. But we really do have a great guest on today. Everyone should go search him on LinkedIn if you haven't already. But Neil Sahota is the CEO of ASCILabs and United Nations AI Advisor. Welcome to the show, Neil.
Hey, thanks for having me on, Jesse and David. I'm excited to be here.
Absolutely. So I am really interested in learning more about you and all of the work that you've done. We had some interesting conversations pre-show. So Neil, why don't you kick us off and give our listeners, our viewers, a chance to get to know you a little bit, learn a little bit about you and what you're doing and what you're doing with ASCILabs. And you also mentioned being a United Nations AI advisor. I'd love to hear more about that as well. So let's dive in and kick it off for us.
Sure. I'm oddly the guy that apparently likes the path of most resistance. I like doing things with a challenge. So that's why I got in the AI space over 20 years ago. But today, like at ASCILabs, what we're focused on is actually cognitive science, and there's better ways of learning. And we can actually activate some of these learning models through AI and metaverse. And so we can help with very complex scenario planning. We also can do things like clone expertise. So imagine taking your your best salesperson, best financial analyst, your best marketer, and actually be able to train other people up to their level of competency. So that's what we're doing there. And then the United Nations, very honored that I helped create AI for Good initiative about a decade ago, and it's focused on using AI and emerging technologies for the Sustainable Development Goals, which, if you're not familiar with, are 17 goals the member nations voted on to create a better, society and hopefully planet and help people. So things like zero hunger, good health, access to justice. I won't bore you with all 17, but in the time we've been doing this, it's very tactically focused. We've completed over 500 projects to date, impacted about 1.4 billion people positively.
Wow, that's amazing stuff. I love that. Great. What a great initiative. But I have to say, you said something about being able to clone my best salesperson. What if you can? I want myself to be cloned, because I want to be able to take a lot of the knowledge and expertise that I have in the business and be able to share it with the rest of my team so that we can get my team up to speed. I know this isn't even one of the topics that we were specifically getting into, but I'd love to dig into that a little more.
Sure. I want to bifurcate that a bit, David, because I get a lot of people ask me that question. What they're often they really want is a digital twin of themselves. So they want an AI avatar that looks, acts, thinks like they do, and could speak to their knowledge, and in some cases participate in meetings, that kind of representation. What we do is we be able to take some of your expertise. So, whether that's, as a business person, the salesperson, relationship building, and then actually be able to train people up to that same level of competency. So it's more upskilling than digital twin representation of yourself. So it's quite possible if that's something you're interested in, we could talk offline about it. But
Yeah,
That's
for
the thing. Like, we were talking about the Matrix before the show. If you remember the movie, there's that scene when they see the helicopter and they're like, "Do you know how to fly the helicopter?" Like, give me a minute.
Mhm.
Information. That's kind of what we're doing.
Yeah, that's awesome. We definitely are going to have to talk offline about that, because I definitely could use that. Certainly will make it a lot easier to onboard new team members and be able to sort of bring them up to speed really, really fast. Love that. But let's Jesse's got our first topic on the screen, so let's jump into this: the dark data economy. How 90% of your data works against you. This is an interesting topic. I'd love for you to kick this off and share your thoughts on this.
Well, it's interesting, right? Because we've been saying for at least a decade now that data is the new oil, right? You have a lot of companies, organizations really honed in on trying to acquire and, for better or worse, hoard the data. But it's gotten to the point where we mistake data hoarding for intelligence, and that's not the case, right? Most organizations say they don't really have a data problem, but they have a belief problem. So, we are used to getting correct answers from computers, and so AI, the fuel is data. So, like, information we're getting from this way, the belief is the data is telling the truth. When in reality, what's really happening is it's telling a comforting story. So, when we think about this, what's really the right data we should be using? I liken this to almost to like learning a new language. With AI become fluent in a new language, it has to hear about 100 million words or phrases, right? So, always talk about big data sets. But a human child only needs about 10 million. So it's not so much the volume that's important, it's just certain words and phrases trigger that cognitive learning we don't quite understand sometimes. And so what we're actually seeing is, with especially large language models, they can be good at like research some of these things, but if you want to create a customer service agent, it's too much of a universe, right? It's just too much obfuscation there that causes hallucinations. Air Canada experienced this where a guy got so frustrated trying to talk to their AI agent that, well, basically it trained the AI agent to create a rap diss song against Air Canada. And that's why you're seeing a push into what we call ASCILabs, small language models. We don't need these big, large universes. We want our agent to be really good at doing one task or activity. Can't really do anything else. We always create other agents. And so from this, what we realized is most data collected today is actually creating drag, not value. And so we talk about this dark data. It's not like it's data that's unused. What it's actually doing is distorting our decision making. So we kind of fall in love with these old kind of behavioral signals we've seen in the past from like a customer that these may not exist anymore. If you look at stale attributes that we treat as facts, it's their probabilities. And so ultimately what we wind up doing is we're really optimizing for volume because we can measure that, but not so much impact. And this is where people kind of get freaked out, is that AI is actually very good about exposing some of these uncomfortable truths, right? AI's gotten proficient enough, if we train it well enough, can actually help us understand what data is actually relevant, what data will actually change outcomes, right? Just not just the data that's going to make like impressive dashboards and reporting. So we talk about AI maturity today. We don't really focus so much on the data anymore. We talk about, ironically, data subtraction. The honest truth is the best AI teams I see and work with today, they spend just as much time killing data as they do collecting it.
Yeah, we've had that conversation with people as well, where everybody's sort of overloaded with data. They're collecting as much data as they possibly can, and then it becomes truly like difficult, right, to figure out what to do with it all, because the reality is you don't need it all. And so a lot of times we talk to people about sort of defining your goals first around what you're trying to achieve, and then go sort of working backwards to try to figure out, okay, what data do we need to get to that goal. and to your point, eliminating everything else and focusing in on the data assets that are actually necessary to achieve that goal. And I think that that is one way that, we've talked to clients and we talked a lot about this on the podcast as well, about how you can sort of get over that data overload in that manner. Because otherwise, to your point, it's just a lot of noise, right? And it becomes problematic. With AI, it can create, like you said, hallucinations. But ultimately, you're getting in the way of yourself if you just have this data overload situation.
You can actually have too much data, right? We can actually overfit models, constrain innovation. I can't reveal the name, but a very large international retail company, they don't ever delete anything because they think all of the data is value. Their product database has over 7 billion records. They have data about products that haven't been made in like 30 years. We talked to them about like just even doing a cleanup. Well, that we might need that one day, right? Like for what?
Yeah.
So I love your whole point that you really got to start with the outcomes in mind.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So important. And, people used to think about, it's funny to hear you talk about how data used to be, or how data is the new oil. Cause I used to hear that all the time. It seems like, and people really did think quantity, quantity, quantity. I need big data. I need all the data. But it's just funny how new technology just helps you learn, and that, the more you know, you don't know, which means your data's bad. And it's funny that you have this stat of 90% of your data works against you, because that's really alarming.
It's just a testament of how much data we've managed to collect. I'm old school. I remember when data collection and storage was expensive. We don't have those problems anymore, and so we don't think about so much about what's the right data. I mean, some of the things like we're using beacon technology, so we can track people when they're like in a physical store and see their paths and all these things. I'm like, okay, that's great. What do you do with that? Well, we don't know yet. Right? It's like,
right.
And it's like 12 years later, and like, well, have you done anything with all that data? Well, no. So
Right.
it's like,
yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
And I mean, we can talk about data quality all day, because it doesn't help an advertiser to have a lot of data when they have a cost per, that data represents a person who's being shown an ad, and there's a cost every time someone sees that ad. So, obviously that's something BDEX helps with, is help create the quality data to improve your return on ad spend, so that you can like actually target your audience. So I don't know there was some really interesting research BDEX did before I started even working at BDEX, about, just all the fraudulent data out there, David, in terms of like how much it was costing advertisers. It just makes me think of that, and how all the bad data out there is working against you. But any thoughts on that, David?
Yeah, that's just another way that that data is working against you, right? And so it all comes back to sort of focusing in on what your goal is and what data is needed to achieve that goal, and eliminating everything else, right? And I think that's good. And to Neil's point, like, it's really interesting to hear that, maybe a decade later, when everybody was talking about big data, that we're actually talking about small data, right? Small language models, really focused, just the data that we actually need, and let's train it on that, and how powerful that can be. And so to Neil's point, we can build agents that are very specific and poignant to what they can do. And everything else is pretty much ignored, because it's not necessary to achieve that goal, that outcome that agent is designed to do.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah,
Well,
cool.
there's a lot we could talk about here, but I'll transition us into our second topic, which starts off with synthetic data, but synthetic data as the new IP war zone. So many questions here in this topic. Just first of all, synthetic data, but then also IP war zone. That is interesting. Especially, I don't know, I think of IP war zone when I think of B2B data, because it's like everything's based on IP, but then I just get the same IP for thousands of people at one business. I digress. But I'm curious, what did you have in mind when you were talking about synthetic data in the new IP Warzone?
So synthetic data, in case people are not familiar with it, is data we make up. So it looks like real data, but did not get like generate from like a real transaction or real world event. And it really got its start in that, obviously training AI, you need to have training data. And you look at financial services, very conservative, focused on liabilities. You had the Department of Treasury, you had the IRS, SEC, other groups now coming in, even the HUD, saying that they want the financial companies, and there are mandates now around this, to actually use AI tools to look for like fraud. So things like money laundering, or fake documents for a residential or home mortgage loan application. Well, the hope is that the lending institutions, the banks, don't actually have enough of that data. They don't have enough data about money laundering to teach an AI. So how do you kind of bridge that gap? You create synthetic data. And so again, we're creating data that looks like real data, but it's not based on like a real world event. And that seemed to work pretty well. And it kind of took off there, and then went into medical imaging. So train AI on systems with X-rays, MRI, sonography, or ultrasounds, because you may not have enough data available yourself because everyone's hoarding data and not wanting to share. The challenge has become, though, is that we've really moved this into being like a shortcut, and it's become the next competitive battlefield, because synthetic data is not created equal, if you will. It's not neutral. While it looks like real data, it reflects a lot of the assumptions of whoever's actually creating the synthetic data. Right? I liken this to the idea of bee drones. This was floated out to me. We're discussing this like back in 2016, 2017, when bees, were dying off because of that rare form of diabetes. And the idea was, could we create drones that do what bees do? And the simple answer is sort of. Right? The 10, 12 things we know bees do in an environment, we could replicate that through drones. But the truth is, bees probably do 1,000 things, but we only know those 10 or 12, right? So we can't replicate all of it, and we might cause harm with some of the things we're not aware of. It's the same thing with synthetic data. So whatever assumptions, whatever biases we're baking into it, we could, unfortunately have an IP risk where we're training models on proprietary behavior patterns. So it can leak a strategic advantage. We know that whoever can control like synthetic generation controls future reality. I see this a lot in medical imaging, that if I give me the top dog in some of these things and train to look for cardiovascular things, vascular things based on my synthetic data, that becomes the new truth. The problem, though, is that this is a blind spot in AI governance, because very few companies can explain what their synthetic data actually represents. So don't think of synthetic data as necessarily fake data. It's opinionated data. It's got use, it's got some value, but by no means is it perfect or reflective of all the scenarios out there. I really believe that in about 5 years, lawsuits won't be about like stolen data anymore. It'll be about stolen patterns. So the way we actually can create the synthetic data will become the key IP point out there. So much as we see a lot of deep fakes or digital twins, we're doing the same thing to data information. And that's why synthetic data has become the new IP war zone.
So that's interesting. I'm wondering, if somebody's creating synthetic data in the manner that you just discussed, like it seems like there'd be a challenge. It would be challenging to create synthetic data without some bias, right? Depending on who's creating the data and what their purpose is for the data, I think the difficulty is that you may be introducing bias that you don't even know you're introducing. Is that a thing? Is that an issue that you've seen? Because it seems like it would be.
It is. I mean, synthetic data aside for a moment, we always say all data is biased, right? Because it's just the way we look and interpret it, but
Yeah.
more so with synthetic data because we're actually creating it. I was talking about using synthetic data to detect money laundering. We started on this road several years ago with, like the banks. People were there was this inherent assumption that money laundering requires, processing large amounts of money, right? You want to clean a lot of money. But thinking about it, it's like, what difference does it make if the transaction is $500,000 or $50, right? You look at practical money laundering, laundry. Those aren't going in and saying, I need $500,000 worth of laundry, right? So, additional synthetic data.
Uh-oh,
So
I
we
think
can
we're losing
really,
you. Is that just me, David?
Yeah, no, I'm hearing Neil breaking up too.
Yeah, I think his internet.
might be, I don't know. The cloud's coming up. Is this any better?
It is a little better now for a second, yeah. But you got a little robotic there sounding for a little while.
A little digitization.
Yeah,
But
that's okay. I think you're
I
back.
was talking to the banks, assuming that it's always large transactions, and there's plenty of proof in reality that small transactions, even as low as $5, could be money laundering. And so,
Wow.
without catching that early on, it would have really skewed the whole AI models because it was faulty synthetic data.
It's crazy to think of.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I see one of the sort of, I experienced something this week with a bias in data that was really interesting. And this isn't related to synthetic data, so I don't know if it's relevant in any way, but you see this happens when you're doing a data analysis and you're doing it towards a specific outcome. It's very easy to create a bias, even unintentionally. And so I'll give this example just so you know what I'm talking about. So we have this, where I live near the beach in Florida, and we get sea turtles every summer, and they come and they nest, and there's organizations that protect those nests. And so one of the challenges that we've had ever since the Hurricane Ian, that destroyed a lot of the wildlife on our island, is that we have coyotes, and the coyotes don't have anything to eat anymore. The smaller prey, like rabbits that they used to eat, are gone. And so they've been going out on the beach and digging up the nests and going after the turtle eggs. And so we have this issue where everybody is kind of up in arms. We have to get rid of the coyotes because they're killing the turtle nests. And so there's an organization on the island that did all of this research and said, hey, we're losing to predators, to coyotes, 40% of the eggs over the last couple of years. And so, like, this is terrible. We have to stop this. We have to kill the coyotes. And so there's been this sort of issue on the island where, this is a wildlife sanctuary where we live. And so why are we killing, I understand that the coyotes are killing the sea turtle eggs, but why are we killing the coyotes? And when they did their data analysis and they came up with all of these numbers, they said, oh, this is really terrible. We're losing 40%. But when the reason why I say this was sort of a biased data analysis was because they're only looking at the data on this specific beach and not looking at all of Florida. And so it turns out our beach, this beach that they're talking about, all of Sanibel, is 1% of the turtle nests in all of the state of Florida. This beach that they're talking about is only 20%. And so now all of a sudden, when you look at the data as a whole, you realize that you're talking about 0.2% of the nests in the state of Florida are getting raided by the coyotes. Well, that's not enough to really, cause a problem with these. I understand these are endangered species, but that's not going to affect the total outcome. And if you look at it as a whole and you look at the entire data set, you realize it's very, very small amount. But if you look at it just on this beach or on the island of Sanibel, then it looks huge. 40% is a huge number. But if it's 40% of 0.2%, well, all of a sudden now it's a very small number. So it all depends on how you look at the data. And they presented this data that I brought to their attention was very biased in the sense it was only looking at this very small section of the data, wasn't looking at the entire data set. So it's very easy to introduce bias to data without even realizing that you're doing it.
100%. And if you're creating synthetic data with using patterns and your patterns are flawed, you're creating lots of data sets that are biased and skewed.
Yeah.
And I put a comment in earlier that said, if humans define the rules for synthetic data, bias doesn't disappear. Like, I mean, humans are flawed. So your synthetic data is going to be flawed regardless. Don't you both think there'll be limitations no matter what?
Yeah,
we have blinders on. I think it was less than 20 years ago, we finally realized that women show different symptoms during a heart attack, right? So, all this data we had for 50 plus years, and it seemed like 90% of heart attacks were only with men, and trying to figure why that's happening. It's like heart attacks manifest differently in women.
Wow.
And so, I mean, can you imagine we created a ton of data sets, synthetic data sets around heart attack data that just didn't know that, right?
Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, I don't want us to run out of time, and I want to make sure we get in the last two topics. So we should jump to the data half-life problem. Love to get your thoughts on this and what exactly this means.
Yeah. So the data half-life problem. Look, most executives assume data depreciates slowly, but the honest truth is, I've seen some of the data expire before the meeting even ends. We know that not all data ages the same. I mean, you think about transactional data, intent data, identity data. The problem is for us, the hidden risk is really that the models we're training, if they're based off of yesterday's reality, they're going to produce very confidently wrong predictions. And AI does not fix stale data, but it does amplify those errors faster. That's what kind of blows my mind away, is that we don't think about that. Once we kind of collected something, we see something, we think it's always true. Ironically, back in my IBM Watson days, the woman who was in charge of the retail sector, the retail industry lead, at the time, she didn't have any children of her own or anything like that, but she had a nephew, and he was going to turn 5 years old. And so she went on Amazon and bought a tricycle, right? So despite never buying anything, a toy for children before, or any kind of searches, Amazon started sending her lots and lots of toy recommendations and advertisements. And it used to upset her to no end, right? Because I'm sure the analysis and stuff says, well, she looks like she's the right age group based off where she lives, probably has this kind of size house. But she never looked for a toy again, refused to buy anything for her nephew from there again because of all this stuff, because Amazon wasn't tracking, like, is this a one-off? When was this data last true, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we don't do a great job as a result of realizing that data has a half-life. So these assumptions that get embedded tend to break when the data breaks. And so that's the big challenge that we have. If we don't realize we have half-life in our data, then our AI is essentially hallucinating with confidence. And we talk a lot about data governance and the need for these access controls, but part of data governance should be just even an expiration date. I can't tell you enough, and I hate to pick on Amazon again like this, but I've written a few best-selling books, and I have an Amazon authors page, but even to this day, like, my first successful book came out over 6 years ago. It seems like every 2 or 3 months, Amazon recommends my own book to myself. And it's like, How is that happening?
They know you really well, that they know you so well that you'd be really interested in that book. But you make a really good point on the data half-life thing, because and you mentioned identity data, which is our business, and it's like every piece of identity data, whether it be your email address, your IP address, your mobile ID, CTV ID, your postal address, they all have different half-lives. They all have your postal address, people don't move nearly as often as your IP address could change. Your IP address could change weekly, same thing with email address. Most people keep an email address a long time, but you also have your work email address. You change jobs, that changes. There's a lot of moving parts to all of that. And it's important to understand what the value is of each data point and what the potential, expiration date is on any of that data, and making sure that you're refreshing it, within that time frame is super important. Otherwise, you just sort of have this old data that's just loses its value completely, and you end up with really bad targeting, right? I I have this issue with. Have you ever seen the Uline catalog? It's this gigantic office supplies catalog. It's like this thick, I guess being a business owner at one point in time, they decided I would need office supplies, and so they sent me this catalog. I have been receiving this catalog for at least 20, maybe 25 years, maybe longer. I have no idea. And I get it every 6 months, maybe. It's this giant catalog. I've never bought anything from them, not once. I can't even imagine how much it costs for them to produce this gigantic catalog and send it to me every 6 months. And they haven't figured out that I'm not going to buy anything from them. I never have, and obviously, never have had the need to. But and they just have not figured out that they need to update their data and realize that if I'm not buying anything, there's no reason. And they have followed me across 3 different addresses in that time. Like, I have moved 3 times since they started sending me that catalog, and each time they find me and they keep sending it to me. It's crazy. So that's just another incredible example of data having a half-life, and that half-life was 20 years ago. You know what I mean? Like they're way behind the 8 ball on that one.
I can't even imagine what that costs. I mean, I've worked on political mailers, direct mailers before, and those are usually just like one page, like a little cardboard stock. But to have like a full catalog,
It's like a
there's
phone book.
postage on each one of those things, and it's going up with the weight of it. Yeah, that's got to be pricey. You better get your data right.
Yeah, it's another good example of that.
I'm just impressed they do a great job in finding you wherever you go, but they haven't made the connection that this guy's not going to buy anything.
Yeah, exactly.
That's true. It really does go back to the original point of the data half-life problem. And I put in another comment here where it was like data captures a moment, not intent. I think, we as marketers, we keep trying to use data to capture intent. And it's hard. And, it helps to pull in multiple things like, oh, they visited the website and they emailed us and they did this and we sent them mail. But like, it goes back to the first topic of, quality over quantity, of like, how do we now vet that a little better to streamline it, to get fewer of those that are like the actual right ones? I don't know. How do we do that? What do you think? What's the trick here?
Yeah, I mean, to your point, intent is essentially it happens in a moment in time, right? And so that's to sort of rephrase your first line there. But once that moment passes, the intent is gone. And so the trick is to understand. And again, it's sort of like a moment could be a different size for different types of data, right? So you're making some sort of like e-commerce purchase, and you have intent, and you're about to make that purchase, and that intent is super valuable in that moment if you can catch that person in that moment. But once that purchase is made, the intent is gone. If you're looking at like buying a home or buying a car, that intent is a little longer, right? That could be a month or more. Okay, so that has a completely different lifeline, right? And a different half-life. But so you really have to understand the different types of intent, and the different half-life for each of those data points.
And when the intent dies, maybe that's where we start to,
Yeah.
like, make our data smaller in terms of who we're targeting, just in this example, is and maybe that's for any example, no matter what you're doing, is when does the intent of whatever you're trying to do, when does that die, and how can you use your data to pull that out?
Yeah. And that depends on depends on the data, right? It depends
It
on the data
depends on the
point.
data.
Depends on the data point itself. Yeah. And so,
That's true.
and you don't always know exactly, because you won't know when someone made that purchase, but at least like 6 months from now, chances are somebody bought the car. And
Yeah.
it's done. Oh, that's the actually, it's funny that example happened to my wife and I. We were buying a car out of state, so we needed a car delivery service, and we would use one of those websites to try to find somebody that would deliver the car. And 6 months later, we were still getting emails and texts from companies that do car delivery saying, "Hey, I'm just following up, or did you still want to move that car?" And it's like 6 months. I think by then I probably moved the car, but that's the thing. Like, you have to understand that for that specific intent, what is the time frame, and then what's the reality, and then you have to expire that data. Otherwise, you're just wasting time and money.
Yeah. It makes me wonder what marketers will come up with next. Like, what will be the next big thing that we're like, now this is the intent. Like, okay, it's I think right now it's website viewers, which is what PDX does. Like, not trying to like plug, but really, I mean, someone came to your website. Here's their name. They were on your website.
Yeah, grab it in that moment in time and retarget them, as quickly as possible, because it can
Time
change.
is of the essence, and don't be a creep.
I don't know what the last part. It seems like they're definitely being a creep, but there are signaling tools that I know that a lot of marketers have jumped into. Like, you can teach AI psychographic profiling or neurolinguistic analysis that has some signals. So, like, there's actually a company that, all right, you talk about car buying, that the dealerships use their thing, and based on the words they choose, the words they talk, they can kind of predict, does this person want to buy a car today, in a week, in a month? They're kind of just window shopping, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
You have like 94% accuracy. But again, these are signals. One of the things that we tend to forget about is that sometimes customers really don't know why they buy, right? It's not a fully conscious decision, or they may not be able to articulate. I've asked this question to a lot of people. It's just, why do you buy the toothpaste that you have, right? And people then start honing, well, works, my used as a kid, never actually thought about it, right? So I ask all the listeners right now, why do you buy the toothpaste you have, right? If you're wondering about intent, there's a great example showing that sometimes we don't know why we buy.
Yeah.
That's
It's a good
true.
point. Absolutely.
Really good point. This has been an excellent conversation. I know we're running out of time, so I want to make sure we get to our last topic, which is something we've asked all the guests who come on the show. So we're curious, Neil, what are some of your favorite tools in your tech stack?
Oh, I'm gonna get in trouble with so many people. In all honesty, I use a lot of proprietary stuff, but for some regular tasks, like, if you use Copilot, you're welcome, Microsoft, because it just helps me sift through emails. I get like 500 emails a day, and so I find it invaluable, and kind of sifting through. And I've taught the agent that if the email is a certain number of words, I'll probably never read it. So can you just summarize it for me and do a little triage? I actually really like using Llama for just visual representation. So if I need some help with AI generation, like a short video explainer or some images, Llama's really great. People always ask me about, like, Gen AI, what's the best tool? And it's kind of varies depending on what you want to do. But you don't want to go through the hassle of analyzing your prompts. I always tell people that Perplexity AI is a great tool, because their AI actually analyzes your prompt and then determines which of the models, whether it's Claude or OpenAI or whichever one. Gemini is the best one to actually use based off your prompt.
Hmm.
So those are some simple, powerful tools. If you're interested in AI agents, which I know are becoming more and more popular, Replit. I don't get paid by any of these guys, by the way, but Replit's a great one. That's kind of a low code, almost vibe code to build very simple agents.
Yep.
So even if you want to do a product demo for your company, Replit's a good place to get started.
Yeah, I agree. I
Love
like Replit. I've used it for a number of things, internal projects. Yeah.
Both of you have used it. And how do you spell it? Replit?
Yep.
Replit.ai or .com?
Com.
.com. Okay, and then you mentioned another one I never heard of, Llama. How do you spell that?
Llama is like the animal, LLAMA. It's actually Meta's AI, Gen AI toolset.
Okay,
So
llama.com.
it's been trained by 4 billion people.
Holy moly. Okay. So cool. Thanks for sharing those. Any new ones there you hadn't heard of, David?
Yeah, I haven't used Llama. I've heard of it, but I haven't used it. So I might want to check it out.
Absolutely. So cool. Well, this has been a really great episode, but before we go, would you like to let listeners know how they might be able to find you, Neil?
Sure. I mean, you can obviously find me on social media like LinkedIn, Instagram, Substack. But I also have a website that serves kind of as a portal. It's just my name, neilsahota.com. So it has connections, obviously, to all my socials, contact form, but it also has links to my newsletter, other relevant articles not written by me. But if you're looking for a lot of practical information and use cases, it's a great source of information for you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Neil. This has been a really great conversation. I appreciate you joining us on the show today.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, I'll go ahead and close us out with our outro video. And thanks to all the listeners. We look forward to seeing you back next week. Thanks again, Neil. Bye-bye. So audience members, we want to invite you to get powered by BDEX. Build authentic connections with your audience and drive unprecedented engagement. So just imagine harnessing the power of AI to craft your audiences that truly resonate with your brand, ensuring that your marketing is hitting the mark every time. We want to bring you closer to those marketing goals, and we're eager to guide you. So just visit bdex.com. You can click on the Talk to an Expert button and get powered by BDEX. Deconstructing Data is the show that makes data make sense. Every Thursday, David Finkelstein and myself, Jesse Lezak, sit down with industry experts to unpack how data really drives marketing. We do this in plain language anyone can understand. If you want real insights, real conversations, and zero jargon, tune into Deconstructing Data live on LinkedIn every Thursday at 4:15 p.m. Eastern Time. Yo.